Okay, so I've been talking about horror video games for the past 18 months or so. Critical analysis of horror video games. I'm starting to include more art theory in my analysis, and I feel like I need a little bit of a break from horror games, and because I feel like if I don't, then my head is going to explode. So I feel like I want to change emphasis slightly and look at something else. Now, my idea is to look at non-horror games. Now, the important thing here is to use my analysis of non-horror games to try and inform my view of horror games. So I will be looking at video games a bit more in a slightly broader fashion, but I will be trying to create a kind of overarching theory of video games, which hopefully will inform my view of horror video games, and to see whether there are actually any crossovers between horror and non-horror games. And I think this could be quite interesting, really, to try and come up with a bit of a theory that runs through all video games. I think this could be quite a fun, creative and intellectual exercise. So I've been thinking for a while, what could we be talking about? So if we're not going to talk about horror games, what could we talk about? So in relation to every other genre, I thought, how about we talk about timeless video games, games which are considered to be classics, and also question why these games are timeless. What are the qualities of these timeless video games? And I think this could be quite a fascinating discussion. So I thought that every week I could present one game, and we could all talk about it together, and we could examine what makes a really successful timeless video game, and why these games are remembered so strongly, and why other games are forgotten, and what are the common characteristics between timeless video games. So in the end, after some exploration, then perhaps what we might be left with at the end of this is some kind of theory, some kind of feeling of a common thread that links all video games together. So it's just a bit of fun, really. It's just a bit of, it's not really a serious academic exercise. It's just a bit of fun, really, if we all just combine our heads together and say, okay, so what are the common threads that run through these great games? And so for the next couple of weeks or so, I'll be presenting what I think are timeless video games, and then we can discuss why they're important. And I know there's a lot of scope for subjectivity with what is a timeless game and what isn't, so I hope that I will pick out games which almost everyone can agree on. So I think it would be useful, just as an opening introductory video, to say to all of you, so when you think of a timeless video game, what do you think of? Which games come to mind immediately? And then you can send them over on the comments, and then that would help me as well, researching the projects, and be able to pick my favorite games out of that list, and we could all talk about these things, and this sort of thing. So if you have any suggestions about what is a timeless video game, just send it to me, and I will put it to the list, and then week by week we will look at these really successful video games and see what we come up with. So this is my opening video, so introducing the concept. I mean, I thought perhaps it would be important to give a bit more detail to this intro video. So, I mean, I'm not really interested in timeless franchises, really, because I'm more interested in singular games. I think that would be a more focused point of discussion if we keep it on to just singular games in their own right, or singular games within franchises, perhaps. So that could work pretty well. Essentially, the reason why I'm talking about this is because my channel title, The Horror of Video Games, I think simply it's horrifying that every year, every every decade there are thousands of video games which fall into obscurity and are forgotten because of changes in technology. This is truly shocking to me, that thousands of games just become utterly unplayable. And so this is really the horror of video games. And I feel by looking back in time at timeless video games, we can perhaps not only preserve old games, but we can also draw comparisons with modern games and this kind of stuff. So I know I'm looking at timeless video games. Now these inherently will survive forever, but these kind of games which fall into the black hole of video game history, these games are not timeless, not because of their own fault, but because of technology, and I think this is a big problem. So anyway, so that's a brief introduction to the project, the Timelessness Project. So I hope that in coming weeks we can talk about it more. And I mean, I could talk for a long time on this theme, but I think I'll save that for perhaps the next video. So guys, timeless video games, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about remembering these games, and also, and why do you think these games are important? So perhaps we could all think together what are these characteristics that bind them together? What are the similarities despite changes in genre and content and all these kinds of things? And so it's a kind of a theoretical exercise, really. But to be honest, I've been playing so many horror games recently, I feel I do need to take a little bit of a break from it, because I think it does. I mean, the average person doesn't play horror games non-stop, just constantly. I think it's a little bit unhealthy to play horror games all the time. So I need a little bit of a break from that, and to probably switch onto a different type of game and different style of games, and also I need to broaden my perspective. I can't call myself some kind of critic if I'm just focusing on one genre, one kind of sub-genre within video games. I think I do need to kind of appreciate and absorb games in their entirety. So, but of course my interest is always with horror. So what you're going to see is a presentation every week of different games that I enjoy. Of course, if I come up with something more interesting than this theme, then of course I'll switch onto something else. But for the time being, this is the project I want to focus on, and on a very simple level, it gives me a chance to go back to some kick-ass video games from the past and just say, not reviewing these games, but saying what are the shining characteristics of these games. And I think this could be a brilliant thing to talk about. So yeah, so that's all I have to say about this. A brief introduction about the themes, and in the coming weeks I will talk more about the concepts and what I think are the main characteristics. And yeah, so this should be a lot of fun. So once again, don't forget to comment, rate and subscribe. You can tweet me at the HorrorVG. This is the Horror Video Games, and I'll see you next time.